If you're not familiar with the Christian liturgical year, then you may have only heard of Advent and just associated it with some candles around the Christmas season. Some know that Advent season focuses on expectation and anticipates the birth of Christ in the few weeks leading up to Christmas. Now, while this is part of the story, and granted a large part, there's so much more to Advent. The word Advent is derived from the Latin word adventus, which means coming. This is a translation of the Greek word parousia. Now, parousia is the common word in teaching regarding the second coming of Jesus today. But for the first believers, it was a word that described the anticipation and longing for the Messiah to show. Right around the 4th and 5th centuries, church leaders in Spain and Gaul used Advent as a season of preparation for the baptism of new Christians, culminating at the Feast of Epiphany in January. It was a celebration of God's incarnation, a recognition of the Magi's visit to the Christ child and his baptism in the Jordan, and his first miracle at Cana. Now, during this season, Christians would prepare by practicing confession, prayer, and fasting to celebrate. Now, over time, Advent became associated with the Christmas season as Christians eagerly anticipated the first coming of Christ and his return. So today, we are inviting you to use this Advent season for two reasons. First, to spend dedicated time recognizing the arrival of Christ, who is God incarnate. His first coming as a child born of meager means, taking on the sins of humanity at the cross, and then borrowing a tomb from which he rose a few days later. But also, please use this dedicated time to eagerly anticipate his return. Much as a child ramps up his anticipation for what's under the Christmas tree, we want you to have time to look forward to his presence. Now, the theme for our Advent journey this year is Darkness Then Light, which comes from a collection of stories in a book of the same title. The idea is that we take time to consider each piece of the Advent as a movement that takes us from dark to light, from struggle to freedom, from shame to grace. We will use the Advent candle to be our guide here, as each week approaches the celebration of our Savior, who is the light of the world. In Isaiah 9, we find these words, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever." Now, Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said, "The celebration of Advent is possible only to those who are troubled in soul, who know themselves to be poor and imperfect, and who look forward to something greater." Now, in the movie Saving Mr. Banks, we watched the saga of how Mary Poppins became a movie and ultimately became stuck in our culture. Pamela Travers, author of Mary Poppins, was incredibly reluctant to hand over her book to Walt Disney because her characters were not just something she made up for a story, but they were personal to her, kind of like a family. Well, after sharing his own story with Ms. Travers, Disney gives a powerful monologue that goes something like this. "Give Mary Poppins to me, Ms. Travers. Trust me with your precious Mary Poppins. I won't disappoint you. I swear that every time a person goes into a movie house, they will see George Banks being saved. They will love him and his kids. They will weep for his cares and wring their hands when he loses his job. And when he flies that kite, they will rejoice. They will sing. In every movie house, all over the world, in the eyes and the hearts of my kids, George Banks will be honored. Maybe not in life, but in imagination, because that's what we storytellers do. We restore order with imagination. We instill hope again and again and again. Trust me, Ms. Travers. Let me prove it to you. I will give you my word." Now, in a way, this is also what Christ does for us. When we give him the broken pieces of our lives, he restores order in our hearts through his creative power. A little like Walt Disney, Christ says, "I can instill hope again and again and again. Trust me. Let me prove it to you. I give you my word." Now, I was listening to a podcast recently by a group of counselors and pastors who said the primary American emotion is disappointment. Now, part of that is what sociologists call the myth of progress. We expect life to be up and to the right, they say, where therapists call the gospel of upward mobility, which is the cause of a hidden trauma in a lot of lives. Add to this the fact that the world doesn't really place a high value on suffering as a means of finding meaning or purpose in life. Now, the same sociologists display a formula that says happiness equals reality minus expectations. The irony is that when you expect a life of ease and upward mobility, like a line moving on a graph from left to right and upward, life is experienced as very hard because it's full of suffering, setbacks, and discontent. But the life that expects the hard stuff ultimately turns out to be very good. Expectations help define everything. That's what hope is. It's an expectation. It's also what Advent is ultimately about, our expectations. So what do you expect in life? Or more importantly, are your expectations buried in the foundational truth that God is going to fulfill His promises? Quite often, this candle is called the prophet's candle because it not only represents the hope and anticipation of Christ's coming, but also grounds that hope in the prophets of old. Listen to some of these. Therefore, the Lord Himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. From Isaiah 7:14. Listen to Matthew 1:23 when it says, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. Again in Isaiah 9, For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Luke 1:31 says, And behold, you shall conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. Look, do you find yourself broken, troubled in soul? Do you know yourself to be poor and imperfect? This is the time we anticipate something better. Hope begins with a child in a manger, and as you gear up for your favorite Christmas movies and seasonal snacks, and as you embark on family traditions and wrapping gifts, spend a moment or 2 or 10 this season finding hope in the arrival of Jesus the Christ. Be blessed by the truth that Jesus, God incarnate, brings to all humankind.